I'll never forget the day I first realized something was wrong with my house. Not because of a broken pipe or a storm, but because of my very own HOA. Yeah, the very people who were supposed to protect property values were secretly plotting to take away my home. It started with a phone call from my neighbor, Jerry. "Hey man, you home?" he asked, his voice carrying this uneasy tone. "No, I'm still on base," I told him. "I serve in the Navy, so I'm away more than I'm home." "Why, what's up?" He hesitated for a second, then said, "There's some guy out front sticking papers to your door. Looks official. I think it's the HOA." Now, I had no idea what he was talking about. I pay my mortgage, I keep my lawn trimmed whenever I'm home, and yeah, I've gotten a couple HOA letters before. Stupid stuff like trash can left out too long or garage door paint fading. But nothing major. I told him, "Take a picture for me." A few minutes later, my phone buzzed, and when I opened the photo, my stomach dropped. It was a notice, but not like the usual "you owe us $50 for weeds" kind. This one had the words "Final Notice" and "Auction" in bold letters. Auction. My house. I remember gripping my phone so tight it hurt. I thought, no, this has to be a mistake. They can't just sell my house because of some small fines. The worst part? I never even saw the letters leading up to this. I was out serving my country, and while I was gone, my HOA was busy stacking fines on me, sending letters I wasn't even there to open, and acting like I was ignoring them. I called the HOA office right then and there. The lady on the phone sounded like she was reading off a script. "Sir, according to our records, you have multiple unpaid fines that have accrued late fees. The board has voted to move forward with a foreclosure auction." "Foreclosure?" I snapped. "I pay my mortgage on time every single month. You can't just take my house over a few $100 in HOA fines." "I'm sorry, sir. At this point, you'll need to speak with the board directly. The notice has already been filed." Filed. That word echoed in my head like a hammer. Filed meant this wasn't a threat. It was already in motion. I called my wife right after. She was with the kids at her sister's place while I was deployed. "They're trying to sell our house," I blurted out, my voice shaking. "What?" she gasped. "That's impossible. We've paid everything. How can they—" "I don't know, but Jerry saw the notice. They're serious." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing strangers walking through my home, bidding on it like it was just another piece of property. My kids' rooms, our photos on the wall, the backyard where we grilled on weekends. It was more than a house. It was our life. And they wanted to steal it over grass being too tall. But here's the thing. I wasn't about to roll over. I started digging, reading HOA bylaws online, searching forums where other homeowners had been through the same nightmare. And what I learned made my blood boil. HOAs actually could foreclose on homes even when the mortgage was fully paid, even for stupid little fines. All it took was enough penalties piling up, and suddenly they had the power to auction your home like they owned it. And the more I read, the more I realized my HOA knew exactly what they were doing. They waited until I was gone, until I couldn't defend myself, and then they pounced. But they underestimated me. Because if there's one thing the Navy taught me, it's how to fight when the odds are stacked against you. The very next morning, I made a call that would change everything. Not to the HOA, not to a lawyer, at least not yet. I called the police. And when I told them what the HOA was trying to do, the officer on the line went silent for a moment. Finally, he said, "Sir, you'd better come down to the station. We need to talk about this." At that moment, I knew this fight was only beginning. Walking into that police station felt surreal. I'd been in plenty of official buildings before, but this time it wasn't about serving my country. It was about saving my home. When I got there, the desk officer waved me toward a small office in the back. Inside sat a middle-aged officer with graying hair and sharp eyes. His name tag read Sergeant Daniels. "You must be the homeowner who called about the HOA," he said, motioning for me to sit. "Yeah," I said, taking a seat. "They're trying to auction off my house while I'm deployed, over fines I didn't even know about." He leaned back, folding his arms. "You're not the first person to walk in here with a story like that. HOAs in this county, well, let's just say they push their limits." I felt my jaw tighten. "So, what can I do? Can you stop them?" Daniels shook his head slowly. "It's not that simple. This is technically a civil matter. But," he raised a finger, "if you can prove they didn't notify you properly, or if the board acted outside of their own bylaws, then you might have leverage." That word, leverage, stuck with me. "Can I see the paperwork they filed?" He pulled a thin file from his desk drawer. "We received a copy when the HOA submitted notice for foreclosure. According to this, they claim you were fined 12 times over the past year, everything from unapproved lawn growth to failure to maintain mailbox paint." I almost laughed, but anger bubbled up instead. "Mailbox paint? Are you kidding me?" Daniel sighed. "I've seen worse, but here's the part that bothers me." He slid a page across the desk. "They claim they mailed notices to your residence, certified mail, and posted copies on your door. Did you ever sign for any of these letters?" I scanned the paper. There were signatures listed, only none of them were mine. My heart pounded. "No, that's not my signature. I was deployed half those months." Daniels nodded. "That's what I thought. Which means someone else either signed those receipts or they never bothered to get a real signature. Either way, this could be fraudulent." For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. "So, what now?" I asked. Daniels leaned forward. "Document everything. Get your deployment records to prove you weren't home, get your mortgage statements to prove you've been paying, and don't, under any circumstances, let the auction go through without a fight. If you want, I can connect you with a lawyer who's handled these cases before." I shook his hand firmly. "Thank you, Sergeant. You don't know how much this means." On the drive home, my mind raced. Fraudulent signatures, false claims. My HOA wasn't just petty, they were dirty. And if Daniels was right, I had a real shot at stopping them. But the fight was far from over. Later that night, I told my wife everything. She was furious. "They're criminals," she said, pacing the living room. "We should call the news, expose them for what they're doing." I nodded, but I wasn't ready to go public yet, not until I had every piece of proof lined up. I needed to hit them where it hurt, legally. That's when I got the first call from the HOA president. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Wilson?" The voice was sharp, almost smug. "This is Karen Blake, president of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association. I understand you've been asking questions about our foreclosure process." "That's right," I said flatly. "Well, I'd advise you not to waste your time. The board voted unanimously. You ignored multiple notices. Your property is in violation and the auction will proceed as scheduled. There's nothing you can do now." I clenched my teeth. "Actually, there's plenty I can do, and I have reason to believe your paperwork contains fraudulent information." There was a long pause. Then she laughed, a cold, fake laugh. "Good luck with that," she sneered. "You'll be out of that house by next month." The line went dead. I stood there staring at my phone, adrenaline surging through me. She thought I was bluffing. She thought I'd just roll over like all the others. But she had no idea who she was messing with, because if she wanted to fight, she was about to get one. The next week, I walked into the HOA board meeting like a man walking into enemy territory. I'd been to a few of these before, mostly boring discussions about pool rules or holiday decorations. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Everyone knew why I was there. The board sat at a long folding table up front with Karen Blake, the president, sitting dead center like she owned the room. Her hair was pulled so tight it looked painful, and her smile was the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "Mr. Wilson," she said as I stepped up to the microphone during the open session, "we appreciate your attendance. Do you have a concern to share with the board?" I almost laughed at her fake politeness. "Concern? Yeah, I've got one. You're trying to auction off my house without telling me. That's a pretty big concern." Murmurs spread through the room. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Karen cleared her throat. "As we've explained in our notices. Notices I never received," I cut in, "not one of them. And you know why? Because I was deployed, serving my country. Meanwhile, you were here stacking fines and forging signatures to make it look like I'd been ignoring you." Gasps echoed across the room. Karen's eyes narrowed, but she kept that plastered smile. "Mr. Wilson," she said as I stepped up to the microphone during the open session, "we appreciate your attendance. Do you have a concern to share with the board?" I almost laughed at her fake politeness. "Concern? Yeah, I've got one. You're trying to auction off my house without telling me. That's a pretty big concern." Murmurs spread through the room. A few neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Karen cleared her throat. "As we've explained in our notices. Notices I never received," I cut in, "not one of them. And you know why? Because I was deployed, serving my country. Meanwhile, you were here stacking fines and forging signatures to make it look like I'd been ignoring you." Gasps echoed across the room. Karen's eyes narrowed, but she kept that plastered smile. "Mr. Wilson," she said smoothly, "those are serious accusations. Our records are very clear." I pulled a folder from under my arm and slapped it onto the podium. "So are mine. These are my deployment papers. Here are my mortgage statements, showing I've never missed a payment. And here's something interesting. Copies of the certified mail receipts you claim I signed. Only this isn't my signature. Not even close." I held the papers up so everyone could see. Even from the back of the room, people were leaning forward, squinting. Karen's smile twitched for the first time. "Mr. Wilson, this is not the place." "No, this is exactly the place," I fired back. "You want to strip me of my home? Do it in front of everyone. Let the whole neighborhood hear how you tried to steal a man's house over grass and mailbox paint." The room erupted in whispers. A couple of board members looked at each other nervously. One of them, a balding guy in a polo shirt, actually raised his hand like he was in school. Karen," he said quietly, "maybe we should, look into this before we move forward." But Karen wasn't about to back down. She slammed her gavel on the table. "Order! The board has already voted. This matter is closed." That's when I leaned closer to the mic and dropped the line I'd been waiting for. "Not closed, not by a long shot, because I've already spoken to law enforcement, and I've got a lawyer who's very interested in your forged documents. If you think you're going to get away with this, you're dead wrong." The room went silent. Karen's face turned red, her jaw tight. For the first time, she looked nervous. I walked out of that meeting with my head high. Neighbors who'd never even spoken to me before patted my shoulder, whispering things like, "Good luck, man," and "About time someone stood up to them." But as soon as I got back to my truck, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I answered, and a deep voice growled, "You think you're smart, huh? You think calling the cops is going to save you? You don't know how this works. We run this neighborhood." The line clicked dead before I could respond. For a moment, I just sat there gripping the wheel, my heart pounding. That wasn't Karen. That was someone else, someone on her side. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about fines anymore. This was war. After that threatening phone call, sleep became a stranger. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the voice in my head. "We run this neighborhood." It echoed like a warning shot. But I wasn't going to let fear eat me alive. The next morning, I called the lawyer Sergeant Daniels had recommended, Lisa Turner, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. She picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Wilson, I already heard about your case," she said briskly. "Daniels sent me a copy of the file. Frankly, this is one of the worst abuses I've seen in a while. They're counting on you being too scared or too broke to fight back, but I think you've got them cornered." Her confidence was like a lifeline. "So what do we do?" I asked. "First, we file an injunction to stop the auction. That'll freeze the process until a judge can review it. Second, we subpoena their records, the fines, the notices, the certified mail receipts. If there are forged signatures in there, they'll regret ever messing with you." I felt a surge of relief, like I could finally breathe. Let's do it. That same afternoon, Lisa filed the papers. The auction, which had been scheduled for the following week, was suddenly on hold. My house wasn't safe yet, but for the first time, the clock wasn't ticking against me. Of course, Karen and her cronies didn't take it well. 2 nights later, I caught a pair of board members skulking near my property line. They froze when my porch light flicked on. "Can I help you?" I barked. One of them, a wiry guy named Doug, shoved his hands in his pockets. Just checking on some, landscaping violations." "At 10 o'clock at night?" I snapped. "Get off my property before I call the cops." They scurried off like rats. But that wasn't the end of it. Suddenly, I started getting petty violation letters almost daily, claims that my trash can was visible, that my blinds weren't uniform, that my car tires touched the grass when parked. It was harassment, plain and simple. I showed the stack to Lisa. She shook her head. "They're trying to bury you in paperwork. Don't worry, we'll use this as evidence of retaliation." Meanwhile, my neighbors were starting to take sides. Some of them, people I barely knew, stopped to tell me they admired what I was doing. "Man, those board members have been bullying us for years," one neighbor whispered while walking his dog. "You're the first person to actually fight back." But not everyone was supportive. One woman glared at me as I walked by and hissed, "You're ruining this neighborhood. Just pay your fines and leave." The division was growing. It wasn't just me versus the HOA anymore. It was neighbor against neighbor. Then came the day of the emergency hearing. Lisa and I sat in a cramped courtroom across from Karen and her lawyer. Karen wore a smug grin, but I noticed her hand trembling as she adjusted her papers. The judge, a stern woman with sharp glasses, listened carefully as Lisa laid out our case. "Your Honor, my client was deployed overseas when these so-called notices were mailed. He never received them, never signed for them, and yet the HOA proceeded as if he had. We have deployment records, mortgage statements, and evidence of forged signatures. This is not just negligence, it is fraud." Karen's lawyer tried to spin it. "Your Honor, the association followed proper procedures. Notices were sent, fines were levied, and the board voted according to bylaws. Mr. Wilson is simply trying to evade responsibility for his violations." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Violations? Such as?" The lawyer shuffled. "Mailbox paint, lawn growth, trash can visibility." The judge's expression soured. "You attempted to foreclose on a man's home because of mailbox paint?" A ripple of laughter went through the courtroom. Karen's face burned crimson. Then Lisa dropped the hammer. "Your Honor, we've also discovered multiple instances where certified mail receipts contain signatures that do not match my client's. We believe the board knowingly falsified records to justify foreclosure." The courtroom went silent. Karen shifted uncomfortably. Her lawyer stammered. The judge leaned forward. "If that's true, Miss Blake, you and your board may be facing far more serious consequences than a foreclosure dispute." That was the moment I knew the tide had turned. The judge granted the injunction. My house was safe, for now. But she also ordered a full review of the HOA's records. That meant Karen and her crew were about to be dragged into the light. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. My wife hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end, because if the board had gone this far already, they weren't going to stop quietly, and I was right. The very next night, as I pulled into my driveway, I saw it, spray-painted across my garage door in big, ugly red letters, "Get Out." I stood frozen in my driveway, staring at the blood-red letters dripping across my garage door. Get out. For a moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My stomach clenched, and a wave of anger rushed through me so hard my hands shook. This wasn't just a dispute over fines anymore. This was personal. This was a threat. I pulled out my phone and snapped photos from every angle. My wife came outside a minute later, gasping when she saw it. "Oh my God," she whispered. "The kids! What if they'd seen this?" "They won't," I said firmly, pulling her close. But inside I was boiling. Whoever did this wanted to scare us into backing down. And if there's one thing the Navy taught me, it's that you don't back down from bullies. I called the police right then. A patrol car showed up within 20 minutes, lights flashing across the dark street. Neighbors peeked out from behind blinds, some even standing on porches to watch. The officer, a young guy named Lopez, took down my statement. "Looks like vandalism," he said, scribbling on his pad. "Any idea who might have done it?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Yeah, start with the HOA board." Lopez smirked, half amused, half skeptical. "You think your HOA president spray-painted your garage?" "I think someone who doesn't want me exposing their fraud did," I shot back. He shrugged. "We'll open a case, but without witnesses or cameras, it'll be tough." That's when it hit me. I needed cameras, lots of them. The very next day, I installed a full security system, motion detectors, floodlights, and cameras covering every angle of my property. If they wanted to play dirty, I was ready to catch them in the act. Meanwhile, Lisa, my lawyer, was sharpening the legal blade. The court had ordered the HOA to produce all their records, emails, board meeting minutes, financial ledgers, everything. And when the documents started coming in, Lisa called me with excitement in her voice. "Jack, you're not going to believe this. Their own records show they voted to foreclose before half the fines were even issued. That means the whole process was predetermined. They were never trying to collect dues. They were targeting you." My jaw tightened. "Targeting me? Why?" She hesitated. "From what I see, it looks like they've pulled this stunt before. At least 2 other homeowners in the last 5 years lost their properties over so-called violations. And guess what? Both houses ended up bought by friends of certain board members, dirt cheap." I sat back stunned. "So this isn't just personal. This is a racket." "Exactly," she said. "And if we can prove it, not only will you save your home, you could bring down the entire board." The thought electrified me. These people weren't just petty rule pushers. They were predators, hiding behind HOA bylaws to line their own pockets. But as word spread, the pressure in the neighborhood got worse. Some neighbors openly supported me, dropping off casseroles or stopping to say, "Hang in there, we're rooting for you." But others gave me the cold shoulder. One man shouted across his yard, "You're making this place a circus." And then there was Jerry, my neighbor, who'd first spotted the auction notice. One evening, he knocked on my door, looking uneasy. "Jack, I gotta tell you something," he said quietly. "Doug, you know that wiry guy on the board? Cornered me yesterday. Told me I should stay out of your business. Said anyone who sides with you will regret it." I clenched my fists. "So now they're threatening my neighbors too?" Jerry nodded. "Yeah, be careful, man. These people are nastier than you think." That night, as I sat with my wife on the porch, she grabbed my hand. Her eyes glistened in the porch light. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Promise me this fight won't break us. I don't care about the house as much as I care about us." I squeezed her hand. "I promise. But I'm not letting them steal our home. Not now, not ever. The following week, Lisa filed a motion to dismiss the foreclosure entirely, citing fraud, harassment, and abuse of power. The court date was set. It would be the showdown, the day everything came to light. But just when I thought I was ready, the HOA made one last, desperate move. The night before the hearing, my cameras caught movement near the side yard. When I checked the live feed, my heart nearly stopped. Two figures were crouched by my electrical panel, tools in hand. They were trying to cut my power. I hit the panic button on my phone, setting off the sirens and floodlights. The figures bolted, sprinting into the night, but not before the cameras got a clear shot of their faces. And when I saw the playback, I couldn't believe it. It was Doug and Karen Blake herself. The morning of the hearing, I walked into that courthouse with my head high, my wife by my side, and Lisa carrying a thick binder stuffed with evidence. My stomach churned with nerves, but underneath the anxiety was a steady fire. Today, it all came to light. Across the aisle sat Karen Blake and her lawyer. She wore a navy blazer, her lips pursed so tightly it looked painful. Doug sat behind her, fidgeting like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I almost smiled, knowing what was about to happen. The judge entered, and the bailiff called the room to order. Lisa stood first. "Your Honor, my client, Jack Wilson, is here today because his homeowners association attempted to wrongfully foreclose on his home using fraudulent notices, harassment, and intimidation. What began as a few minor fines was twisted into a scheme to steal his property. We will show evidence of forged signatures, predetermined board votes, and even criminal vandalism and attempted sabotage by board members themselves." The judge raised her eyebrows. "That's quite a list, Ms. Turner. Proceed." Lisa began with the paperwork, the fines, the so-called certified mail receipts. She pointed to the signatures, then to my deployment records. He was out of the country. He could not have signed these. The judge leaned in. "Mr. Wilson, can you confirm these signatures are not yours?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said firmly. "I've signed my name 1,000 times in the Navy. That's not me." Karen's lawyer tried to object, claiming the signatures looked consistent enough, but the judge cut him off. "We'll let a handwriting expert decide that if necessary. Continue." Next came the bombshell, my security footage. Lisa set up a small monitor and played the clip. The grainy video showed Doug and Karen sneaking toward my electrical panel, tools glinting under the floodlight. The siren blared. They looked straight at the camera, then bolted. Gasps erupted in the courtroom. The judge's gavel slammed. "Ms. Blake," the judge thundered, "are you telling me that is not you in this footage?" Karen's face went pale. Her lawyer stammered, Your Honor, this video could be doctored." "Enough," the judge snapped. "I know doctored footage when I see it. This is clear as day." Karen buried her face in her hands. Doug muttered something under his breath, his eyes darting around like a trapped rat. And then came the final strike. Lisa presented records showing that in 2 prior foreclosures, the winning bidders at auction were relatives of board members. Houses sold for a fraction of their value, then flipped months later for massive profits. The judge leaned back in her chair, her expression like ice. "So let me get this straight. This HOA has a history of targeting homeowners with inflated fines, pushing foreclosure without due process, and funneling properties to associates for profit? And in Mr. Wilson's case, you compounded this with forged documents and acts of vandalism?" The courtroom was silent. Karen didn't answer. She couldn't. The judge slammed her gavel again. "Foreclosure denied. This case is referred to the district attorney for investigation of fraud, forgery, and criminal conspiracy." Furthermore, I am ordering a full audit of the Oakwood Estates Homeowners Association." I felt my knees go weak, but this time from relief. My wife squeezed my hand so hard, tears welled up in her eyes. Lisa gave me a small, satisfied nod. As we walked out of that courtroom, reporters swarmed the steps. Apparently, word of the case had already spread. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward. "Mr. Wilson, how do you feel about today's ruling?" one reporter asked. I looked right at the cameras. "I feel like justice finally caught up to bullies who thought they were untouchable. No homeowner should have to fear losing their house over a mailbox or a patch of grass." The clip went viral. Neighbors who had once avoided me came by to apologize, to thank me for standing up. And when the district attorney eventually charged Karen and Doug, the entire board was dissolved. A new one was elected, with rules in place to prevent abusive power ever again. One quiet evening, as I grilled burgers in the backyard with my kids laughing nearby, my wife leaned against me and whispered, "We almost lost this, but you fought for us." I wrapped an arm around her and watched the smoke drift into the sky. I said, "We didn't just save our home, we saved the neighborhood from people who forgot what community means." Because in the end, it wasn't just about fines or foreclosure or even revenge. It was about drawing a line in the sand and saying, "This is my home. You will not take it from me." And this time, I'd won.